I Like Me Better by LeilahMoon, read by LMX Mabella. Chapter 19. It was the morning of the Gryffindor vs. Ravenclaw match, and Harry was being heralded as some sort of messiah as he strolled into the great hall with his firebolt. Despite now having it back in possession, Harry and Ron were still not speaking to Hermione. "Sure you can manage that broom, Potter," said a drawling voice. Draco had arrived for a closer look, Crabbe and Goyle right behind him. "Yeah, I reckon so," replied Harry casually. "Got plenty of special features, hasn't it?" said Draco, eyes glittering mischievously. "Shame it doesn't come with a parachute in case you get too near to a Dementor." Crabbe and Goyle sniggered. "Pity ye can't attach an extra arm to yours, Malfoy." The Gryffindor team laughed loudly, and he stalked away. The impending prank had been in Draco's mind for a long time now, and today was the perfect opportunity. Potter deserved it for all the trouble he had been causing Hermione. At 11:15, the students began excitedly heading down the pitch. Eventually, the whistle blew, and the game began. Hermione was reading yet another book in the desperate hopes that it would help Buckbeak, when she heard Cho Chang scream from her broom and point downwards. Getting up and peering over the edge of the stands, she saw 3 Dementors on the pitch. Panic flooded through her, but as she looked back to Harry, he plunged his hand into the neck of his robes. Whipping out his wand, Harry roared, "Expecto Patronum!" Something silver-white, something enormous, erupted from the end of his wand. It shot directly at the Dementors, and Harry drove his broom forward to catch the snatch. Whilst the Gryffindors burst into cheers around her, Hermione looked more closely at the crumpled heap of black material on the floor. She could see something wriggling. Suddenly, a pale face emerged, gasping from the pile, and Professor McGonagall stormed over, her rage palpable. Hermione could barely contain her laughter. There, in the middle of the Quidditch pitch, were Draco, Crabbe, Goyle, and Marcus Flint, all struggling to extricate themselves from the long, black hooded robes. She would never let him hear the end of this. Despite their continued silence towards her, Hermione made herself go over to Harry and Ron in the common room as soon as she received a letter from Hagrid. Without preamble, she said, He sent me this." Harry looked confused, but took the damp parchment from her. Enormous teardrops had smudged the ink so badly in places that it was very difficult to read. "Dear Hermione, we lost. I'm allowed to bring him back to Hogwarts. Execution date to be fixed. Beaky has enjoyed London. I won't forget all the help you gave us. Hagrid." "They can't do this," said Harry. "They can't. Buckbeak isn't dangerous." "Malfoy's dad frightened the committee into it," said Hermione, wiping her eyes. "You know what he's like. They're a bunch of dollery old fools, and they were scared. There'll be an appeal, though there always is. Only I can see any hope. Nothing will have changed." "Yeah, well," said Ron fiercely, "you won't have to do all the work alone this time, Hermione. I'll help." "Oh, Ron!" She couldn't help herself. Hermione flung her arms around Ron's neck and broke down completely. She had her friends back, and they were going to help. Since Sirius Black had attempted to break into Hogwarts for a second time, the safety measures imposed on the students made it impossible for the trio to visit Hagrid in the evenings. Their only chance of talking to him was during the Care of Magical Creatures lessons. He seemed numbed with shock at the verdict. "It's all my fault," Hagrid said. "Got all tongue-tied. They was all sitting there in the black robes, and I kept dropping my notes and forgetting all them dates he looked up for me, Hermione. And then Lucius Malfoy stood up and said his bits, and the committee just did exactly what he told them." "There's still the appeal," said Ron fiercely. "Don't give up yet. We're working on it." At these words, Hagrid burst into tears, buried his hands into a handkerchief, and hurried back towards his cabin. "Look at him blubber," Draco said derisively. "Have you ever seen anything quite as pathetic? He's supposed to be our teacher." Harry and Ron both made a furious move towards Draco, but Hermione got there first. Smack! She had slapped him around the face with all the strength she could muster. Draco staggered. Harry, Ron, Crabbe, and Goyle stood flabbergasted as Hermione raised her hand again. "Don't you dare call Hagrid pathetic!" "Hermione!" said Ron weakly, and he tried to grab her hand as she swung it back. "Get off, Ron!" She pulled out her wand. Draco stepped back. Crabbe and Goyle looked at him for instructions, thoroughly bewildered. "Come on," he muttered, and next moment all 3 of them had disappeared into the passageway of the dungeons. Hermione walked into their nook in the library incredibly sheepishly that evening. She was hoping that Draco wouldn't be there, but unfortunately she had no such luck. He had purposely positioned himself so that she could immediately see the mottled purple bruise on his cheek. "Draco," she began. "Granger, how are you?" "I'm really fucking pissed off, Hermione." She couldn't help but tilt her head and look at him curiously. She didn't think she'd ever heard him swear before. Draco waved his hands in front of her face. "Hello? Don't go off into your head." "Sorry, yes, I'm here. I'm really sorry, Draco. I don't know what happened. I just... She broke off, horrified to find her eyes filling with tears. "No, Granger, no, you can't cry. I'm the one having emotions right now, not you." Frantically swiping at her eyes, Hermione said in a rush, "There's no excuse for what I did. I was so overwhelmed with everything that was going on, and well, you were there. You were doing my least favorite sneer." "You've ranked my sneers," Draco interrupted. "In my head, I suppose. There are ones I prefer more than others." "Please go back to your original soliloquy." "Yes, okay, so your face, and then you said those awful things. I don't know. I felt like the wall I'd built around my emotions just broke. Does that make sense?" If only she knew how much sense it made. Hermione continued. "I'm so exhausted all the time. Harry and Ron have spent weeks not talking to me, continuing to get in trouble, even though a mass murder is after one of them. I've been constantly researching information for Buckby, and it hasn't made an ounce of a difference. Your father's word is the law after all. Who cares about the truth, right? I feel so helpless all the time. I wanted to hurt someone, anyone. I wanted to hurt someone, so maybe I'd stop hurting." Draco felt his own walls shatter and pulled her roughly into his chest. He was almost a head taller than her now and could rest his chin just above her forehead. Gently stroking her back, Draco could feel Hermione shaking. Tugging them to the ground, he leaned against the bookshelf and curled himself around her small frame. They sat like this for a long while, drifting in and out of consciousness, floating in the bask of their safe and warm cocoon. Eventually, Hermione shifted towards him. Her breath tickled his face. "Why did you say those things about Hagrid? I know you don't like him, but it really wasn't necessary." Draco hung his head. "I know that. Blaise has started making snide comments to me recently, saying I've changed and that I'm weak. I can't risk my father hearing that, Hermione. I don't know what he would do to me. Or what if it made him start looking at me a bit more closely and he found out about you?" He burrowed into her neck. "I can't let that happen." "What are we going to do, Draco?" "I don't know, but I'll always keep you safe." Chapter 20. Lost appeal. They're going to execute at sunset. Nothing you can do. Don't come down. I don't want you to see it. Hagrid. Reflecting back, it was this letter that set off a sequence of events which ultimately led Hermione, Harry, and Ron to be the hospital wing's current residents, yet again. She could hardly believe all the things that had come to light in less than 24 hours. Sirius Black was innocent, Harry had a godfather, Remus Lupin really was a werewolf, Peter Pettigrew had betrayed the Potters, and he had escaped for a second time. For a while it had felt as though they had lost yet again. Hermione recognized the familiar black pit steadily building in her stomach, the sense of helplessness that never ceased. That was until Dumbledore reminded her of the invaluable item she currently possessed. "Miss Granger, 3 turns should do it." Hermione and Harry had just slipped back inside the ward, and as she crept into her bed, she took a moment to acknowledge what they had achieved. Next second, Madame Pomfrey had come striding back out of her office. "Did I hear the headmaster leaving? Am I allowed to look after my patients now?" She was in a very bad mood. Hermione and Harry thought it was best to accept their chocolate quietly. Madame Pomfrey stood over them, making sure they ate it. But Hermione could hardly swallow. She and Harry were waiting, listening, their nerves jangling. As they took their first piece of chocolate, they heard a distant roar of fury echoing from somewhere above them. The voices became louder, and she could tell it was Snape. Cornelius Fudge, Snape, and Dumbledore came striding into the ward. Dumbledore alone looked calm. Indeed, he looked as though he was quite enjoying himself. Fudge appeared angry, but Snape was apoplectic. "Out with it, Potter!" he bellowed. "What did you do?" "See here, Snape, be reasonable," said Fudge. "This door's been locked, we just saw—" "They helped him escape, I know it," Snape howled, pointing at Hermione and Harry. His face was twisted, spit was flying from his mouth. "Calm down, man," Fudge barked. "You're talking nonsense." "You don't know Potter," shrieked Snape. "He did it! I know he did it!" "This will do, Severus," said Dumbledore quietly. "Think about what you are saying. Unless you are suggesting that Harry and Hermione are able to be in two places at once, I'm afraid I don't see any point in troubling them further." Snape stood there, seething, staring from Fudge, who looked thoroughly shocked at his behavior, to Dumbledore, whose eyes were twinkling behind his glasses. He whirled about, ropes swishing behind him, and stormed from the ward. When Hermione, Harry, and Ron left the hospital wing at noon the next day, it was to find an almost deserted castle. The sweltering heat and the end of exams meant that everyone was taking full advantage of another Hogsmeade visit. The trio spent some more time together, simply lazing beside the lake, watching the giant squid waving his tentacles happily above the water. Harry had run off quickly once he heard that Lupin had resigned and was due to leave Hogwarts imminently, so Hermione took a moment and slipped away from Ron, heading to the library. She wasn't sure whether Draco would be there, given the glorious day, but she wanted to try anyways. Almost running towards their nook, Hermione beamed with relief. "You're here!" Draco couldn't help but smile back at her. "Snape was in a foul mood this morning, and I had a hunch it was because of you and the gruesome twosome." "Oh yes, he was raging when he left the hospital wing last night." "Ah, good, the hospital wing again. It's about time the Gryffindors moved their common room somewhere more appropriate." Hermione scowled, but took him through everything that had happened up to the point they first arrived in the ward. "But I heard Black had escaped." "True, and there's really quite a simple explanation for that," she told him. "Oh, yes?" "Well, you know I've been exhausted all year." "Yes, Granger, you've fallen asleep on me numerous times. Like I've said before, I'd come to expect more from our friendship." Ignoring him, Hermione continued. "So, Professor Dumbledore gave me permission to use a time turner. I've been using it to manage my timetable, and that meant—" "I'm sorry?" Draco interrupted, staring incredulously. "What now? Please just repeat that." "I've been using a—" Draco cut her off with a wave of his hand. "Actually, no. I don't need to hear those words again. You've been using a time turner to attend extra lessons?" Hermione opened her mouth and then closed it again. How was this sanctioned by the Ministry? How did Dumbledore say this was okay? Actually, how could anyone say this was okay?" "It's very important that I achieve a well-rounded education," Hermione suggested. "Granger, I have no words. You're a liability." "Anyway, you're missing the entire point here," she chided. "The reason Buckbeak and Sirius escaped was because Harry and I used the time turner to go back in time and sort out this whole mess." He paused, blinking rapidly. "Time-related magic is unstable. You're meant to avoid serious breaches of time law. I'm fairly certain what you just told me would count as, a breach." "I know what I'm doing, Draco. We only went back 3 hours and we didn't engage with our past selves. Mostly. I didn't, anyway." "Please don't tell me." Hermione smiled. "Anyway, you'll be pleased to know that I went to see Professor McGonagall this morning. I've decided to drop Muggle studies. Honestly, the time turner was driving me mad. Without that and divination, I'll be able to have a normal timetable again." "Thank Merlin." Draco raised his hand to the sky dramatically. "You're ridiculous," she laughed, poking his ribs. "Whatever I will do without you for another whole summer." "I imagine it will be touch and go at points, but I'm sure you can make it through the pain." This year, as a self-proclaimed goodbye present, Draco was gifted with not one but 2 hugs. He was also adamant that the kiss to his cheek briefly caught the corner of his lips. The end. Part 1 is finished. Hermione and Draco have made it through their first 3 years of friendship, and we are now entering the next stage of their relationship. So, stay tuned. Thank you for listening to today's chapters of I Like Me Better by LeilahMoon, read by LeilahMoon. If you would like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube, Spotify, AO3, Instagram, or Tumblr.